Hey guys, I went and got myself sick, so sorry in advance for the audio in this video. I have a small video I want to respond to today. It's a clip taken out of a stream from Thor from Pirate Software. You may have already seen this guy's many clips around the internet, or maybe you are even a fan of his streams. If you don't know who he is though, he is a very successful streamer. He worked in the games industry and talks about several matters within it. He clearly knows a lot about the inner workings of the industry, about programming, game development, hacking, all sorts of stuff, and he's got the credentials and the accolades to show for it. He's got a lot of fun videos showing people or talking about how certain things work in some games, or showing people hidden features on some softwares of ours, etc. But in this clip here, he was super dismissive towards the matter of the poisoning of the games industry through politics. So I'll play the clip right now for you guys in full, and then, we'll get into it and talk a little bit about it, have a nice little chill video here. It's also going to allow me to talk a little bit more about wokeness in games. What exactly does the word entail? What exactly does it mean? What makes a game woke? How did we kind of get to where we are right now, where there's so much of it in the AAA space, so on and so forth.
So the ones that are mad are just saying that games are ruined because woke shit in the game. Stop playing those games then. Yeah. Literally. Why are you playing games that you're mad at? Just go play other games. There's millions of games in the market. Steam is infinite games, dude. Like, there's so many goddamn games to play. And I think that kind of a argument is deep nonsense. Because I think that's really funny is a lot of people don't remember the history of games. They don't understand that 10, 15 years ago, you had basically two body models. You had the beach babe body model, and you had the buff man body model. And that was it. And there were a bunch of people who are like, hey, this game doesn't showcase a character model that I can identify with in any way. And people said, oh, go make your own games then. So they did. And now you're getting games that have those in them. And now people are saying, well, I don't want those in my games. Then go make your own games.
So I don't have the original link for this entire stream, so I don't know exactly what they were talking about right before this clip began. I don't know what exact example Thor was referring to, where people who are mad are just saying that games are ruined because of woke stuff in it, unless he was referring to that as a general statement. So I won't be pressing too much on this point, but I still do feel the way with which he approaches this matter to be very, very lacking, especially for someone with the degree of knowledge and presence that he has in the industry. It's still worth noting though that this is a clip taken from what I believe to be his TikTok, Thor Speaks. So if there was more to the message that he wanted contextualized, then I think he should have definitely put it in. Because as it stands, it's a very vacant and unrealistic statement. Whenever I'm browsing stuff online, it's one thing to see a random guy going, boo, screw this game, go woke, go broke. They got the right to express themselves any way they want. I just find it lacking. I like to identify what exactly is the problem with what I am looking at, what exactly makes it woke. Is the entire game compromised in some way or another, or is it like an element that is woke and that is perfectly like acceptable, or something that can be compromised with, etc. There's various degrees to when it comes to talking about, woke video games. What exactly makes a game woke? Is the game ruined? Is the game still good? Does the game still have redeemable qualities to it, etc. And if I can do all of this without even bringing up the word woke, then all the better for me. Because at the end of the day, the word is very ill-defined, and some people have their very own definitions of it. To some people, if they see the word woke, it's a game that they will never touch. To some other people, if they see the word woke, it just doesn't mean anything to them, they don't care. And to some other people, if they see the word woke, they think that whoever just said the word is an absolutely unreasonable person to have any kind of discussion with. But I'm still not going to fault random people online saying it, because it's just random people online. But it's entirely different when it's an industry insider or someone with a big platform that built a career in part thanks to being knowledgeable about the industry and speaking on the matters surrounding it. In other words, if you're someone that people look up to talk about matters within the industry, then you should put in the effort to not misrepresent the matters that you're talking about. To dismiss it like that just shows disingenuousness or ignorance, or I don't know, like someone trying to run away from the matter, to not talk about it at all. I don't know what exactly is Thor's position on it, but the arguments that he presented are pretty terrible.
Stop playing those games then. Yeah. Literally. Why are you playing games that you're mad at? Just go play other games. There's millions of games in the market.
So in the matter of not playing these games, it's like, yeah, no shit. I think it's pretty obvious that gamers are avoiding these games, including movies and shows of the similar nature, made with these ideological intents, products made with the goal to inject socio-political messaging or promote certain values held by what we are calling the far left right now. And the main reason for that is that these ideological injections are often made in immersion-breaking ways or are purposefully designed to moralize on the players, almost like a fourth wall break, without directly addressing the audience, but that is still unquestionably towards the audience. And of course there's other ways that these things can be put into media: purposefully unappealing or unconventional designs, deconstructionist tropes, diversity quotas, etc., all of which are meant to leap out in some way, shape or form and cause a reaction, which is precisely why they became a problem to begin with. At least in my opinion, that is it. It wasn't that some diversity was in there, because there's always been some degree of diversity within the industry as it evolved. And yes, there are more extreme people out there who are against even the smallest inklings of these things, where for them, for example, a gay character is already too much, or a black protagonist is already too much. I'm not denying that these extremes exist. However, these extremes have always existed, and it was never enough to cause a wave of rejection and controversy like the one that we are seeing right now. And that's because this constant push for more and more of it, and for straight up overt political messaging and moral grandstanding on what is okay, what is not okay, what should be allowed, what should not be allowed, and of course the ideological takeover of studios has made this become a thing that is no longer just the most extremes that notice it and stand against it. Now even normal, regular, everyday people who are more centrist or even left-leaning, people who are fine with or who are even themselves gay, bi, lesbian, trans, etc. And of course, it also goes without saying, but female gamers and gamers who are not white, we end up being against this stuff as well, because it is affecting media in general. It's affecting the very quality of our media, and at the end of the day, we just want that media to go back to being something for entertainment and escapism. And maybe it could even be said that this stuff started in a perfectly tolerable way. Hell, we could even say that it started in a natural way, like a natural evolution of the way that we presented our media by mimicking the world around us. So for example, the appearance of more gay characters than what we had in the last century comes to mind, the diversification of a game world for more realism in certain modern settings, etc. Another example would be the presentation of female characters in some genres to appeal to a growing number of female gamers, while also still retaining the interests of the male gamers, resulting in badass good-looking characters like Lara Croft, or very likable, independent but also appealing characters like Elizabeth in BioShock Infinite, feisty little punks like Ellie in The Last of Us, who was still liked in The Last of Us 2 even by some of the people that did not like the direction of the story that particular game took, Nariko from Heavenly Sword, so on and so forth. Games with characters that were designed to be appealing to everyone, and I don't just mean the visual design, but also their characterization, their personalities, and the development of their stories. The problem was that this stopped being a natural evolution and it started becoming a politically motivated forced evolution. And I say this with as many air quotes as I can summon, because this is not evolving anything. If anything, it's taken us backwards. It has become politically motivated to push the envelope as far as possible in several ways, featuring LGBTQIA+ people and particular matters within that community, as well as, of course, for example, intersectionality, which deals with feminism and oppression in incredibly stupid and regressive ways, and a bunch of other stuff. Honestly, I don't want this to be like my other videos where it lands in a 40-50 minute length. I'll give a couple more examples from a list, but that's it. This information is readily available for anyone that bothers to look for it. I'm not like a fucking genie from a lamp or anything, I'm just a regular dude. Suffice it to say that these things, which are perfectly encapsulated by the term DEI, come in all shapes and sizes and affect games in different ways. Here's a list on screen right now, shared directly by Xbox Game Studios, of how differently these things can affect the creative process in the development of a game. You guys can pause and read it in full if you like. I'd just like to draw attention to, for example, the way that female characters are designed, the way that developers have to keep in mind all manner of nonsense pertaining to what might be potentially offensive, dismissive to some groups of people and cultures in the world, as well as what they can do to make sure that they equally and respectfully represent those different groups and cultures within the game in a manner that gives them pride. And in terms of diversity quotas, you can even read right there that they say that they have a quota for screen time. So if a game has, let's say, white, black, Asian, and Indian characters, they must try to equalize their screen time in the game, regardless of if that makes sense or not within the very narrative of the game and the importance of the characters. Or hell, thanks to the E in DEI, which stands for equity, it may even mean to remove screen time from the white and Asian character, for example, since this DEI nonsense is literally a rotting cesspit of regression that wants us to look and judge ourselves and each other via our race, gender, sexuality, and other immutable characteristics cross-referenced with delusions of privileges and prejudices that are never practically observed. They are just assumed based on skin color, gender, sexual orientation, and some other fun things like religious backgrounds. It's the oppression Olympics, basically, and none of this stuff belongs in the games industry. This is a simple medium for entertainment and escapism. It doesn't need all of these fucking departments and initiatives and oversights enforcing artistic and cultural changes into video games and studios. Basically, when I bought a video game, I bought a video game to entertain myself. I didn't buy a ticket to the fucking Geneva Conventions. Being overly cautious of this kind of stuff is obviously placating creative freedom and introducing literal restrictions to whatever you're making. I like to look at Dragon Age Veilguard as an example of this going terribly wrong, where it's not even the non-binary character with the cringy non-binary and misgendering scenes that throw a wrench in a playthrough that went above 100 hours for me. If those scenes were it in a 100-hour playthrough of a game, I could cringe, I could still be like, I don't like this because it's pushing an ideology that I do not agree with and I don't think that it belongs in the video game, etc. I could still talk about it, but it wouldn't have been this game-breaking deal. The major problem was these little sprinkles of this kind of ideological mentality present in everything surrounding the game, making the game numbingly safe with terrible dialogue, zero player freedom, zero memorable dialogues, no personality, comically evil superficial villains, and even a dumbing down of the factions in-game to make sure that no one was offended. So, like for example, making the treasure hunter faction not be treasure hunters because that implies that they would find treasures from other cultures and take it for themselves, because of course that's what Indiana Jones type of people do.
Feel free to use the ancient elven artifacts for weight training, but nothing leaves with you, okay?
Don't worry about that. The Lords of Fortune aren't thieves.
I mean, aren't you though?
Nah. Anything we hunt is salvage. Old forgotten ruins and crap. And we make sure we're not screwing over a culture that lost it. That's what my mother does with the Kunari stuff.
Holy Jesus.
Or for example, the total bastardization of the Antivan Crows from assassins to whatever the hell this was.
Who are you?
Namaste. I'm Fabian.
Good Lord.
And of course the same kind of similar thing done to the Wardens. All of this stuff is not only completely unnatural, completely antithetical to the creation of art in a medium that should be primarily for entertainment and escapism, but it's also inherently political, which Thor does not acknowledge. And it's also in total opposition to his story that the fans of the earlier years of the industry looked at the Beach Babes and the Buff Dudes, they did not like them, and so they went and grew up, they all got into game development, and now they are the ones making their own characters, and that's why we are where we are right now with purposefully bad-looking characters. And we're just supposed to ignore the agenda behind it. We're just supposed to ignore even the overt examples like this partnership between Dove and Epic Games, trying to push forth that this right here is the real beauty of the real world and what nearly 70% of female gamers want based on a completely made-up study by themselves. I think this is obvious to everyone by now. This is inherently tied to politics. Even people like the Actman see it themselves. He may not be willing to honestly engage with it aside from doing a debate with Andy Pants instead of having more serious conversations with actually serious people in regards to this stuff, but he at least sees that this relates to politics, even if he disagrees or downplays its severity. But in this clip here, Thor just rushes past it like if it was just a silly little nonsensical thing, or a natural evolution sort of thing where people who did not identify with the older characters went to make their own games, somehow ending up in these super popular studios working on $100 million projects, and also somehow having enough power within the company to create unappealing character designs that are not in demand. Like, just try to picture it in your heads, right? So somehow these companies just looked at these people going, you know, what if the female character had a chin like Lord Farquaad? Or, you know, what if we took this beautiful actress, scanned her, and then tweaked her face until she's barely recognizable? Basically, essentially walking up to the head honcho of the studio and going, you know, instead of this objectively good character design that appeals to the vast majority of players, empowers women the same way that manly strong characters like Kratos empower men in these fictional power fantasies, and is also safer to use even to attain new players, how about we just use this objectively bad character design that appeals to a devastatingly tiny minority of people that didn't even play our games to begin with? And somehow the head honcho of the studio went, holy Jesus, you're a goddamn genius, Johnson. I'm gonna place you as the director of our next video games. Like, I'm sorry, but are we supposed to believe this fantasy in an industry notorious for already struggling to give us exactly what we wanted in the name of more monetization? An industry where even if developers wanted to give us a full product at launch, still had to go and cut out pieces to sell to us separately as DLC, this dog-eat-dog industry would allow random schmucks whose ideas are to make risky, unappealing, and divisive content just because they walked up and said that they didn't identify with the old stuff, and across so many different studios already, and following a pattern that is already more than visible from across this figurative ocean by looking at what's been happening to Disney on the other side, who fully bought into this and has also been bleeding money ever since. Like, come on, man, this has not been a natural development. But also, you know, in the interest of good faith and all that, I would assume that Thor is saying stop playing those games, go play millions of other games, because he sees these people complaining about these woke games online. But naturally, you can complain about something being bad without heading out and playing it. This is also not anything new. People complain because they want to see this industry get better. Thor's comment makes it sound like he's fine with just letting this festering wound sit there, untreated, to the point where it goes necrotic. Like, no dude, this is a terrible approach. It's ridiculous. We love this medium, we want to see it do better, and it's incredibly frustrating to see it go down in flames for the stupidest of reasons. When it comes to seeing a studio get shut down, which is obviously something that is always bad, I would much rather see a studio go under because they went nuts with ambition and tried to make a bizarre game concept that they just did not have the budget or the manpower to finish, ending up delivering a incomplete game and shutting down, rather than seeing them go under because they wanted to introduce politically driven content into their world building, storylines, writing, character design, etc., while demonizing their fan bases, just to raise their studios and publishers' ESG scores and play ball with companies like BlackRock. And that's just a drastic example because honestly it's not even what we're seeing. What we're actually seeing is big publishers pushing this kind of stuff into pre-existing franchises via upcoming sequels or reboots, or even new IPs that could have been so much better if they didn't adhere to this poisonous stuff, or if they didn't work with consultant companies like Sweet Baby Inc., Hit Detection, etc., who openly admit that they have an agenda and a hatred for gamers and the industry as a whole. I know I don't just speak for myself here when I say that we complain because we care and we just want games to be better. I understand how risky and fucked up the games industry can be. It can truly be a dog-eat-dog kind of place. I can't imagine how much goes into building a new IP from scratch. I can't imagine how difficult it must be to deal with publisher oversight or seemingly impossible market demands. I am not an idiot. Most of us know and respect what it takes and just how seemingly miraculous the launch of a big game can actually be. It is because of this understanding that so many of us are so passionate and can be so harsh in our criticism, but equally loving in our praise of a genuinely good good game. A few years ago, the ire was mainly coming from predatory monetization being constantly pushed into video games, and now it's coming from politically charged content being pumped into games, and also affecting the very core of the studios that make those games, as they go big on DEI practices and initiatives which, let's just speak the facts here, are more concerned with diversity quotas and quality, and this even goes as far as to affect their hiring process and the people they work with. Enter the aforementioned consultants again. So for example, when people see the disaster that was Concord, they aren't just yelling out "woke garbage, boo" because of some pronouns in a menu screen and some ugly characters. They are seeing $400 million that could have been spent on better games instead, and they are also seeing a figurative win against this ideological takeover that made the game possible in the first place. And some people like to say that Concord has nothing to do with wokeness. It's a game that failed because it was a fundamentally bad game. And yeah, the game was very bad. However, it was because of this quote-unquote wokeness, these ideologies, that fostered the environment for the game to be made in the first place. Because only this kind of environment can breathe activists within these studios, such as that developer at Firewalk whose pronouns were the professor, or for example the terrible environment inside of Ubisoft where this stuff has gone so far that they've got DEI departments for their DEI departments, where you can't even use an exclamation point in a message because someone may take offense at your tone and get you called into a meeting with HR. Of course, we also have Veilguard, which we just mentioned a few issues from, a game whose director thinks that the point of the franchise has to do with identity politics, as per her very own developer diary on the BioWare website. You guys can pause and read it all if you like. I already covered it in previous videos, so I'm not going to do it again. And we can also see this kind of thing happening right now with Obsidian, where a little cabal of higher-ups like Matt Hansen, who are totally out of their rocker, are injecting their personal baggage into future games, openly admitting that they're not creating these games for everyone, they are creating them for those who are as politically unhinged as they are, while sidelining everyone else who just wants to play a good game once in a while. You know, which just happens to be the majority of their fanbase. This stuff is quite literally representative of compromised studios, and these compromised studios are all unnecessarily making games that have a far lesser chance of succeeding, a far lesser chance of just straight up being good games that we want to play, from once promising studios that we loved, and all just because of politics. It's just sad and upsetting to see. Only through this political idiocy could we have such negligence in the industry. There is no way that we could go back 20 years and find this going on in the industry to this extent, where big brands like Microsoft, Ubisoft, Sony, etc. are harboring and even propping up these developers who are hardly even developers, whose goals are to literally not appeal to their established fan bases. Their goals are quite literally to not make money. Oh sure, you could find some morons here and there who thought that they were the shit or who lied to people. We always got to see a lot of lies and misrepresentation of games over the years. There was that Peter Molyneux guy, for example, from Xbox, and of course Ubisoft was always very hard to trust with their trailers. There was also of course Randy Pitchford and the whole story with alien colonial marines, etc. But not like this. I mean, if anything, those guys lied to protect their brands and try to get as many people to pre-order their games as possible before the critics and the reviewers got their hands on the games and exposed how broken or lackluster the games actually were. But now, these quote-unquote developers, they tell the truth to get people to not buy their games, and worse, they're deeply affected by this terrible climate, deeply influenced by echo chambers that make them demonize anyone who doesn't think the exact same way they do, and label them as people on the alt-right, so they believe that they're righteous in what they're doing. They aren't able to grasp the fact that they're turning away even the people who don't care about politics at all, who aren't even on the other side, and who merely want to dive deeply into an immersive world and escape the toxicity of social media and the tiredness of real life, because to them, even these kinds of people are the enemy. There is no justice in having seen good studios going under or being sidelined to support studios because of an honest accidental bad flop, while these studios here still remain up simply because they are now ideologically protected from their intentionally bad flops.
And I think that kind of a argument is deep nonsense. Because I think that's really funny is a lot of people don't remember the history of games. They don't understand that 10, 15 years ago, you had basically two body models. You had the beach babe body model, and you had the buff man body model, and that was it. And there were a bunch of people who were like, hey, this game doesn't showcase a character model that I can identify with in any way. And people said, oh, go make your own games then. So they did. And now you're getting games that have those in them. And now people are saying, well, I don't want those in my games. Then go make your own games.
Honestly, this is what was deep nonsense. There is a vast stretch of history that is being completely ignored, which is that vast stretch where normal evolution took place, with natural diversity, as the games industry expanded and more people from across the world started working on games, and the very medium itself evolved to wanting to explore new ideas, new settings, new genres of game, etc. And to this day, it keeps on growing and evolving. The gaming space is literally big enough for everyone, and there are many games within the cozy space, for example, where all manner of, let's say, progressive ideas are part of their design, and we can all coexist as gamers without having a single issue with it. This is exactly why I made that video criticizing Andy Pants and his abysmal take that games were getting gay and retarded, while giving examples of stuff that was just not for him. They were normal games, some designed more for children, as I believe one of them was literally like a cartoony puzzle game, and then others more geared towards the relaxing or cozy genre. He even threw in a JRPG, lumping in games with anime art styles or JRPGs in general as this label throughout his video of woke, gay, pussified and retarded. I criticize this because I defend certain games' rights to exist. I can even defend Dustborn's right to exist, for example. Even though I hate what it's doing, it's a game funded through the government and grants that have these lame-ass ideological messages in mind, so of course I will still criticize it, and of course I'll still criticize the activists within the studio who want to take over the medium, including the owner of the studio, who was just a very weird man in these with all these weird anti-white comments that everyone in the game's media ignores. They ignore it for him, they ignore it for Kim Belair, they ignore it for that chick who made that Validate game and admitted to not hiring white people because they're not safe to work with.
I have a team of 21 right now, but who is your team? Validate has a team of mostly all people of color. We have no white people on our team. I did that because I wanted to create a safe environment. And I know the best way for an environment to be safe is to be around people who are just like me.
What are you, fucking stupid?
I am saying that sometimes it is hard to work with white people because they think that something made it okay, but it was really a microaggression. No one wants to deal with that while they're trying to make a game that they love.
She didn't even lose her job. Instead of losing her job, she got promoted. Now she's working on the Black Panther game at EA. They ignore it for their own people, like for example the idiot from IGN who's racist as fuck, also against white people, who was telling everyone to either boycott or pirate Black Myth Wukong. But I guess this whole double standards and hypocrisy stuff is a matter for another day. The point is, I may criticize something like Dustborn because it is a step in the wrong direction, an abysmal game with a terrible message behind it, but it's perfectly fine if it's isolated. Like 10 years ago, if that game came out, I would think that it was a meme and move on. It would flop and nobody would care. But while there is a culture war going on, raging within the industry with big publishers pushing for this very same stuff that Dustborn had in its game, Dustborn immediately becomes an example of what not to do and of what to push against. And of course, it becomes a symbol as well. And if a symbol fails very hard, and if people vocally push against that symbol, then they are sending the message that, hey, this is not what we want, please do better. Which brings me to the conclusion, which is that none of this was ever necessary. People can create whatever they want, but what Thor is conveniently leaving out is the fact that they already do, and nobody messes with these different original games in their own little corners of the gaming industry. The reason why this is such a massive shit show of a debacle is because of the political motivations within the big publishers pushing to include this stuff in our major franchises and major AAA releases. Basically, they are forcing this stuff in the worst way possible, where the writing, the design, and more whatever other implementations of this stuff is so bad that it literally breaks immersion, breaks lore, breaks appeal, all so that it can be as shocking and divisive as possible to the masses, and they are doing it towards established fan bases. They have the option to create their own brand new IPs within their own little genres and spaces where this stuff fits into and actually makes financial sense as well, because naturally you can't go make something with minority appeal in the AAA market while wasting hundreds of millions of dollars of budget. This is just going to tank studios and IPs, as we've already seen happening and as is presently happening as we speak with Ubisoft. But they don't go with that option because it's irrelevant to them, because they are activists. Game developers would develop a video game, keep their budget and their audiences in check, make something proportional with what they have, release it, see what happens, work on a sequel, maybe something else, expanding it bit by bit as they could, or whatever their decisions would be at that point, which is something that we see in these smaller genres that I just talked about. Activists, on the other hand, have entirely different intentions. They hide behind terms like diversity and inclusion, but they're not really looking for that. Inclusion is not the goal. The goal is to take territory, and that's why they go for the massive AAA market. That's why they're all up in those studios, and that's why they don't have the business sense to think something along the lines of, well, now that I work here at BioWare, I could make a pitch for a game with identity politics in mind, since it means a lot to me. I could write stories and characters and dialogues circling these issues that I identify with. Something smaller at first with an appropriate budget. See if it takes off. If it would add to our studio's repertoire, and if it doesn't, it's fine either way, it's not a big deal. Meanwhile, Dragon Age and Mass Effect can keep going on the main lines. But they don't think this way because they don't care about the business. They only care about the end goal of the agenda, which is we're going to take Dragon Age, we're going to do whatever we want with it, we're going to disregard lore, gameplay tenets, player choice, etc., and we're going to pump as much of this progressive ideology into it as we can. And if it fails, we're just going to call everyone who didn't like it a bigot, because how could anyone be against acceptance, tolerance, diversity, and inclusion? Only a bigot, of course. So, honestly, in conclusion, yeah, no, this isn't a situation where the industry just evolved naturally and new people just showed up wanting to make their own character designs because back in the day they didn't like the character designs that they were being fed. It's totally plausible when it comes to the indie space, but when it comes to the AAA space, when it comes to this whole discourse about wokeness, absolutely not. This is a situation wholly dependent on political motivations and progressive ideologies taking over the studios through monetary incentives. Also not a secret anymore, as we can see with the ESG system and with companies like BlackRock coming out and openly admitting that they are here to force behaviors.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. We added 4 more points in terms of diverse employment this year, and what we are doing internally is if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted. Okay,
we're doing the same thing.
And so it's just you have to force behaviors, and if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race, or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted.
A sure mark of natural evolution in this industry is profitability, even in ways that we don't like. For example, microtransactions, to an extent, ended up working because enough people sadly bought into them. You could call that some fucked up, corrupted version of an evolution, but it is a natural progression nonetheless. And anyone with eyes can see that this progressive ideology bullshit that is actually 100% progressive in practice is not profitable. It's obvious that it's degrading the quality of the games and also of the shows and the movies when it comes to Disney, and it's also obvious that the wider audience has not taken to it. It's been getting worse and worse with each year, ending up with a lot of games being rejected by gamers this year. And yeah, that's about it. This was a very dismissive and disingenuous framing of what's going on in the industry when it comes to this woke discourse, and I just wanted to call it out. I know that I am a very small channel, my reach is very limited, but it would not sit right with me to just ignore such a huge and influential persona in the gaming circles to reduce this serious matter into such a tiny, pointless little thing that is as simple as, oh, it's just new people these days making the characters that they never got to play as back in the day. And, you know, just make your own games and stop playing these games, fuck them, you know, just ignore them, fuck the industry, let it all burn down to the ground while you watch. Yeah, I am just not a fan of that idea. Thanks very much for watching, sorry for the sickly voice, hope you have yourselves a great day. If you enjoyed the video, it really helped me out if you click the like button, and yeah, if you want more discussion stuff like this and reviews and analysis, subscribe. Alright, now I'm going back to bed. I'll see you guys on the next one.